This video lesson is brought to you by EmPowered Schools, an Alliance to Save Energy program. In this benchmark, you will learn about global warming and climate change, be able to explain the difference between the two, and explore some of the regions throughout the world most affected by warming global temperatures. But before we can begin to understand global warming and climate change, we need to talk about greenhouse gases. So, what exactly are greenhouse gases? First, it helps to understand Earth's atmosphere, which is a very thin layer of gases that surrounds our planet. Picture an egg dipped in water. Just that water that coats the egg represents our atmosphere. Most of this atmosphere is made up of nitrogen and oxygen, but it also contains small amounts of what we call greenhouse gases. There are many greenhouse gases, but the two that have the biggest impact on the environment are carbon dioxide and methane. Carbon dioxide is a colorless and odorless gas that is released at a large scale by burning fossil fuels. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas commonly emitted through livestock and the exploration for oil and natural gas. Unlike CO2, which lasts in the atmosphere for 300 to 1,000 years, methane only lasts for about 8 years. Despite its shorter lifespan, it has a huge impact. 1 pound of methane is 120 times more powerful at trapping heat than a pound of CO2. The increasing concentration of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane are greatly affecting the surface temperature of the Earth. When the sun's light hits the Earth, some of it is reflected back into space, while some of it is absorbed by the Earth and becomes heat. CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere trap this heat from the sun, further warming the Earth. We actually need some of these greenhouse gases in order to maintain our planet's temperature, ensuring it doesn't get too cold for human life. Wait, does that mean we need greenhouse gases to survive? I thought greenhouse gases were bad. Greenhouse gases are natural. We all release a certain amount just by breathing. But in excess, they are very dangerous to our planet. Human activities like the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial livestock farming have resulted in an increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases. Our use of fossil fuels has increased the levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere from about 250 parts per million in the pre-industrial era to well over 400 parts per million today. Why do you think these numbers have risen drastically? What has caused the increase? Take a moment to analyze this CO2 timeline. What global and historical events are occurring at the same time as this rise in greenhouse gases? Since the Industrial Revolution, humans have made a lot of advancements. We've invented cars and airplanes, developed new medical and agricultural technology, and mass-produced phones and computers. These technologies have changed how humans interact with each other and with the world. But we've also had to tap into a lot of the Earth's natural resources and consume a lot of energy to make these advancements happen. As a result, this human activity has released more greenhouse gases like CO2 into our planet's atmosphere. From a distance, you can see that the amount of CO2 particles in our atmosphere has increased rapidly over the last 150 years. However, if you zoom in on the timeline of CO2 emissions, you will notice that the graph looks less like a line and more like the teeth of a saw. Let's zoom in on 1960 to 2000. Within each year, the amount of greenhouse gas particles fluctuates up and down. Take a moment to hypothesize why this may be the case. There are several reasons for the zigzag lines in the graph you just looked at. The fluctuation of CO2 emissions happens because of seasons. There are more trees and vegetation in the northern hemisphere than in the south, so when spring comes, all the growing plants absorb carbon dioxide, lowering atmospheric levels. In the fall and winter, when these plants lose their leaves, CO2 levels in the air rise again. Even though CO2 concentrations in our atmosphere oscillate season to season, the overall trend is increasing, which is helping drive a rise in global temperatures. This process is called global warming. Global warming can cause massive shifts in regional weather systems that affect the places humans, plants, and animals inhabit. This is called climate change. Climate is the average weather conditions over time. Weather is local and changes day to day and month to month. So while the planet is slowly warming, it doesn't mean that it will always be warmer everywhere, every day. But global warming is driving more and more extreme weather events, and this is part of climate change. The Earth's climate has always changed throughout history, yet most of these changes have been gradual over time. What makes climate change unique is that it is being driven by our behavior, and that behavior is having abrupt and damaging impacts on the Earth's ecosystems. One of the heaviest hit areas is our oceans. We depend on oceans for much of the world's oxygen and food, but the increased levels of CO2 in our atmosphere is causing ocean acidification, or the levels of acid in our oceans, to rise. Increasing acidity levels are turning vibrant, healthy reefs into underwater deserts, and healthy reefs are vital for supporting other aquatic life forms. In addition to threatening sea life, warmer temperatures make water expand, causing the oceans to swell. Swelling oceans combined with melting ice sheets are causing a rise in global sea levels. This is leading to an increase in flooding and natural disasters in coastal communities throughout the world. Some regions will experience the effects slowly, over time, and others are feeling it dramatically, today. Let's take a look at Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a country about the size of the state of New York and is located in South Asia, where it borders eastern India. Most of Bangladesh's population of 164 million people live near the Bay of Bengal because soil along the coast provides the most fruitful farmland in the country. However, the Bay of Bengal is experiencing a drastic rise in water temperatures, which is causing the sea level to quickly rise. At the same time, the Himalayan glaciers, the Earth's third largest body of snow, is melting. The rapid melting of this resource is overwhelming Bangladesh's rivers. This means that water levels are rising both inland and along the coast, and when natural disasters hit the coastline, the country experiences flooding throughout 60% of the country's landmass. Additionally, the glaciers provide a critical water source for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, and the devastating effects of climate change on this region threatens the fresh water supply to about 2 billion people. As a result, the Bangladeshi people are being displaced in alarming numbers and may contribute to the largest mass migration the modern world has ever seen. And this catastrophe does not just affect people. The Delta is home to the largest mangrove forest in the world, and the rising sea levels bring in saline waters and are shrinking the forest and land itself. At the current rate of greenhouse gas emissions, NASA projects that our planet's average temperature may increase by another 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit by the year 2100. That may not sound like a big number, but the Earth's ecosystems are as sensitive to temperature change as your body is. If your temperature rose 3.5 degrees, you'd have a serious fever. For the Earth, it would mean dramatic climate disruptions for humans, animals, and the complex ecosystems on which we depend. However, that doesn't have to happen. How much and how quickly our planet warms depends largely on the energy choices we make today. The United States contributes 15% of the world's CO2 emissions, though we make up only about 4% of the world population. So, what can we do to lower our carbon footprint? We can reduce our carbon footprint by making sure we are using energy efficiently. We can turn off lights and electronics when we're not using them. We can adjust our thermostats by turning down the heat in the winter by 2 degrees and raising it 2 degrees in the summer. Energy is also directly related to water. It takes a lot of energy to move, clean, and heat water. You can reduce your shower time by 5 minutes, report and repair leaks when you find them, and use cold water to wash your clothes. To save even more energy, a useful phrase to remember is reduce, reuse, recycle. This means be careful not to use more than you need, reusing items rather than throwing them away, and recycling things like cans, bottles, and paper. Transportation is another huge source of greenhouse gas emissions, but you can reduce them by walking, biking, carpooling, or taking public transit when available. Food also takes a ton of energy, especially to produce meat. One of the biggest steps you can take to reduce your carbon footprint is to eat less meat. You can also cut your emissions by eating food that's grown locally instead of being shipped across the world to make it to our dinner plate. Governments around the world also have a big role to play in combating climate change. They can protect and restore ecosystems and pass legislation to support the transition to a clean energy future. They can push for energy efficiency standards, invest in public transportation, and enact emission standards. Perhaps the most impactful thing you can do now is spread your knowledge. Teach others what you know about climate change. Urge our government to act, and empower everyone to make smarter energy choices. Together, we can be part of the solution today.